guys, welcome back to the Awful Music Podcast. Today we have Andrew Grathwohl. He is a technology madman, music lover, and I guess you could say music obsessor, an absolute devoted admirer of the musical form, art, technology, as he calls it. Andrew makes a lot of bold claims in this podcast, and I want to prep you ahead of time knowing that. He is an extremely interesting and well-read man who has a lot of extreme opinions. This goes for any podcast, or especially ours in general. Take nothing we say at face value. Always research things for yourself. This is probably my favorite episode to date. It's definitely Casey's favorite episode to date. I think you guys are gonna have fun with this one. It's a wild ride. Let's get into it.
You know what the problem is? Carl Sagan was a nerd, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Neil deGrasse Tyson is a geek, and geeks blow.
You talking because of the gatekeeping?
You know, he's a geek. He's really into geek culture. He likes Star Wars. He likes to talk about science fiction. He trivializes his own supposed expertise by trying to minimize its value and its reach and importance only into realms that are extremely obvious, like outer space films.
Like, so, okay, yeah, seriously.
And that's really a horrible thing to do to your own practice and your own study. And it cheapens the so-called accomplishments that he's actually.
I don't know.
Achieved.
I think there's a bit of give and take though, because I mean, you can think about a whole bunch of YouTube channels that I can imagine off the top of my head that want to touch on a like prescient cultural moment, because that's how you got to chase the views. Sure. Speaking as a person who does that.
Are you recording the film?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right.
And speaking as a person who does that, like sometimes you can take that moment of the people low information, just like, I'm gonna friggin' that's a thing I know, I'm clicking on it, and then give them something good and useful.
Does this sound better to you? I swear this sounds better than the other one.
I don't have any monitors.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I believe
it was weird. I plugged it in earlier and I was like, is there like, there was like a whole other dimension of air, like shit above 20K. And I think like it could be in my head, but I'm like, I swear to God, like there's something in this interface which is weird, because it was the SSL2 that I had before, and this is way newer, but it's weird to hear. I swear I'm hearing another dimension of air.
You're hearing an oversampled DSP chip, I think. It's probably running at 192.
Yeah, well, I thought the SSL2 was as well.
Billions of air molecules.
Billions and billions of hertz.
Did you watch obviously the original Cosmos, but did you watch the one with Neil deGrasse Tyson?
I tried to. I couldn't even stand it. It drove me nuts. I hated it within 5 minutes, I think. Yeah.
Do you remember why? Dude.
Because it wasn't genuine. I knew, and maybe if I had not ever experienced Sagan's version, maybe I'd have a different perspective on this. But after going through that, it's hard to want to hear that kind of information given any other way. But the thing is, man, again, I don't believe that he has quite the cultural width of him to be able to really apply what he knows in a way that is generally exciting. Carl Sagan.
Do you think he
passionate.
has? Do you think he's kind of like the Joel Osteen of science?
I think that's Fauci.
Oh.
But the question's a good one, right? Which is, what is he doing with his unfavorable kind of actions, and what's it leading to? It's not money that he cares about. Clearly, it's something else. It's another kind of power that he's after.
Influence, fame, notoriety. Yeah.
It's more like what Kissinger became in the media. Well, he started dating Hollywood actors, right?
So I see you're saying, I understand what you're saying. I managed to disagree only because I think it's just that I listen to him a lot, and I've heard him apologize for himself a lot. And
yeah.
Okay. I don't mean necessarily like, oh, I fucked up. I mean like apologetics apologize. Like, for example, on the thing I sent you guys the other day, his podcast with Coleman Hughes, who I like, listen to his podcast often. He went on, Tyson went on a whole diatribe kind of lamenting his absence from the research field over the last, however many years, because he decided to switch into the science communicator field, like learning,
Right.
figuring out how to communicate to people who don't know science. And part of the reason that he did that was because he said he was so appalled by how the technocrats handled communicating science to people during COVID. He thought it was so horrific that he wanted to make it even more of his focus than it already was. And so now he's like, well, the downside is like, I should be working on my next research paper, but like, this is my focus now. And so, okay, so I can see how maybe if you don't know that his passion is legitimately educating people, it might seem that he's more focused on that as an endeavor than actually publishing papers and staying relevant on the what's the word, kind of the cutting edge of research.
Do you know of him publishing recently? Like, is that something he did even 10 years ago?
Yeah, well, I think it was around that was the last time, but I can't remember. I mean, I remember him talking about his work all the time on his podcast.
Because even Sagan's publishing record is not that impressive. He has a couple of papers that are noteworthy still that have been cited a lot. His biggest contributions, I think, were just to like UFO theoryology and stuff like that. And I don't know. Sagan, yeah. As much as I like him, I don't recognize him as being a big achiever in scientific research.
Well, that's the thing too, is like, in order to
great teacher.
In order to be a useful speaker on science, I don't think you necessarily have to contribute to it. You just have to read. You have to be a good scholar, What
I think is most important is scientific method and being able to convey the way you think about things in a scientific framework. And I don't think he's responsible for this, but surely he should be aware that the scientific method is all but dead.
What do you mean?
This is a great
Tyson?
music podcast.
We'll turn it around.
It's good. I don't know if but before we get too much further, let's at least introduce you.
Well, can I just say real quick?
God damn it. Go for it.
I don't know if you read Tyson's new book, but his book is about analyzing culture through the lens of science. So it's entirely focused on applying the scientific method, in his own, obviously to try to unpack his own biases and the biases of other people. For example, he looks at scientific racism, right? Mm-hmm. This idea from however many, like 100 years ago in anthropology, where they made up reasons for why Black people, since they were, closer to apes for this and that reason, are therefore inferior. And what he does in the book is he like flips it on his head, and he's like, well, there are actually just as many ways that white people are uniquely similar to apes that Black people aren't. And he lists those, right? And so he kind of does that in multiple domains of culture. And I think it's fascinating. Obviously, it's the scientific method isn't a infallible check against our biases, but it's the best method we have to provide a check against our biases. Right? I mean, we don't have a better one, right? It's not like the answer to bad science is less science or worse
science with control variables would be good. That's the thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, no scientist would disagree with you, but
a lot of virologists would, and a lot of
there's a lot of times where you just can't have a control.
All right. Let's introduce our guest.
Hi, I'm a guest. By the way, how much are you guys paying me for this?
Not enough.
This is not a union gig here.
You're paying you in exposure. Yeah.
Righteous.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
So this is Andrew Grathwohl.
Hello.
Andrew, what do you do? What's your gig?
Ooh, well.
That you can say.
I am somebody who is closely tracking what I believe is going to be the death of music.
Oh.
And
okay.
I'm very worried about it.
Yeah.
And I feel great right here.
It's something that disturbs me because I believe music is beautiful and powerful, and it's been highly misused over the last 100 years. And I'm somebody who spends most of my waking free time thinking about how I can fix what technocrats and engineers and nerds did to ruin music by industrializing it.
There's so much to unpack there.
Sorry.
I wish I could have Jamie. No, you're good. I wish you could have Jamie run this back so I could take this like one sentence at a time. We could spend an hour on each. Like, holy shit.
Could you?
That's a lot.
Well, yeah. Just elaborate.
Of course. Yeah. So I'm someone who's always had a deep and profound love for music, and at the same time, I've had a lot of background and expertise over the years in technology, and especially the personal computer, which really saved me because I had developmental speech as a kid, developmental speech problems. And when I couldn't say words at the age of 4, my parents decided to put him in front of the Macintosh.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And, you know, what it led to was fixing everything. And I've always been very indebted to people who think of things like Steve Jobs did for giving someone like me a chance in a way that I would not have had. And then when you look at music, it's much the same thing. Many, many kids flower and become themselves through their musical explorations.
Amen.
And those moments, I'm sure you both know, right, are really, really important for, I'm sure, all three of us.
Yeah.
And
I had my first period when I picked up a guitar.
well, that's actually my point, dude. It's like you remember where you were when you heard albums for the first time, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so
big time.
We can't escape it as much as we want to. Music is not just a technology, which I do think it is. It's part of human evolution.
Oof.
And
we need to hop back to that. That's very interesting.
My point here is to say, when I was growing up, I had an interest in the computer and I had an interest in music. And then Napster happened. And because of that, I had the most enriched, culturally sophisticated childhood I could have ever had because I was able to have access to the entire world's music library.
Yeah.
And I'm very afraid about the fact that no other kid, unless we change course, will ever experience that. And that means we won't have another Beethoven. We won't have another Michael Jackson. So I'm somebody who works in the audio and music spaces. And all I do with my income basically is apply what resources I have towards this problem. I do it as a composer. I do it as an engineer. I do it as a software developer. But I'm all about music and saving it from nerds.
Could you just explain what you think it is that is inhibiting the arisal of the next, proverbial Beethoven?
But if I can pause you real quick, I also want to mention I've heard Andrew's music preferences, and they are exceedingly respectable. Some of it's really fucking bizarre and out there, but all of it is very emotionally effective.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
This shit is rough. But yes, Casey has a very good question, actually.
Yeah, I want to know what it is that makes you think that, why you think that.
So
what mechanism through the industrialization, or maybe it's not that facet of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a number of ways we can look at it. I'd like to set this one stage, which is that music is something that we can use to predict what will happen like 50 years from now. It's actually one of the only ways that we have to kind of envision our future. And so music's not about showing what's happening right now, right? It's about showing what other possibilities could happen, And so with that in mind, if you think about it, right, our parents, when they were born, hip hop didn't exist.
Yeah.
And then hip hop existed. And that was probably around the time where you and I, all three of us, were probably born, mid 80s, early 90s. And if you think about it, no music genre has come about since we were born. No new massive change in the musical landscape has come about as we've matured.
If anything, it's just been like subgenres, not brand new meta genres.
That's right. And that means that there has been a lack of procedural innovation. People are not thinking hard about their process and about their study of music. And it's evident when you see that the most innovative music out there today is K-pop. Because they're the only people.
You think it's innovative?
It's extremely innovative because it's the only
fucking awesome,
music that uses fandom and standing basically as like their cultural currency. It's all about the battles that you have at the K-pop stadiums where the different artists have like their stands and they have their lights that they hold up in the crowd.
You say standing?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's a Zoomer term.
Okay.
Yeah, it means it's like being a super ultra fan, always defending.
I don't understand.
Being an ultra fan, is a kind of a conventional cultural thing.
Earlier you were standing Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Correct. And so when you think about it, though, that's not music, right? That's sort of external to music. And so when you kind of look at the changes that have come about in music throughout our lifetime, it's been about introducing ways to monetize mediocrity.
Yeah.
Because the thing that they've been trying to do in music since the 80s is kill off the radicalism and the innovation so that they can have cheap and predictable returns on their investments. And the worst way to do that is to take a chance on a good musician. The best way to do it is to take a stripper or an actor or some socialite and turn them into a musician.
Can I push back really quick?
Course, yeah.
Feel free, man. This is your show.
So is that something you're intuiting based upon what you're seeing, or is that something like you know people who have observed this, and that's actually their real motivation is to like fuck the radicalism?
So yeah, I would say it's a combination of my background at media companies,
okay,
as well as my background in music.
Like my initial thought would be it's a byproduct of wanting secure, reproducible results that are safe, because businesses like things that are reliable.
That's true, but so you'll hear Frank Zappa talk about this at some detail, which is that he'll say, music was better when the GE microwave CEO guy was running the music companies because they understood how to run it like a business. And they also understood the way that risk factors into return. And if you look at today's labels, especially in the indie space, it's made up of people who failed at their initial goal of becoming musicians in the music industry. No longer are there sharks running music. It's failed musicians running music. And by failed, I mean musicians who gave up.
Yeah.
And that is like the worst possible attitude that you could ever employ to a business that you run. And by the way, fuck the music industry.
Yeah, I love
do
that
it
shirt,
yourself.
Yeah. He gave me one of those.
It's an important message.
I'll buy one.
Basically what is the implication, or not, even more so than just implication. I think
make sure you get it on the camera there. That's you over there.
Whoop.
It sounds like what you're saying is that someone who gave up doing music or perceives themselves to have failed is not going to invest in a risk that's similar to what they think they tried sufficiently hard to make work. So they're gonna be like, well, I already tried that, so I'm not gonna invest in you doing that, even though they fucking just gave up, basically. Whereas a business type would understand to take the risk. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Because what they're doing is looking
like
at the
projection
risk
almost,
It's also like when that's how you get into music, you're doing it by kind of failing up.
Oh yeah.
Jesus, that in Hollywood, Jesus fucking Christ.
Well, and that's right. That's the issue with music, is that it was absorbed by Hollywood because it became a method for advertising. When you think about it, like no top 40 artist today, really, with the exception of a couple of glaring exceptions, actually, really is noteworthy in any way, shape, or form for their music.
Wait, would you say that Billie Eilish is? Yeah, your name?
Billie Eilish actually is an interesting, not even an exception, sort of like a middle ground of this problem. Because here's her problem. Her problem is that she didn't defend herself. She started out with, she was starting on a trend that was just beginning.
Keeping in mind when we talk about her, we're also talking about Finn, her brother.
That's correct. And that's kind of what I mean, is that he's flowered into this kind of multidisciplinary artist producer type. And that has betrayed Billie Eilish, who has, I think, a much limited range and has really specific needs to make her music sound good. And Mr. Eilish can certainly do almost anything he wants.
Yeah.
Almost like H.E. Cook going from PC music to Grimes in like a year. That's the sign of the power players in music now. It's the producers. And they're people who yield technology that makes music mediocre. They're people who are the ambassadors of bad software.
Why do you think they're making mediocre music?
Well, it's actually not that.
Software, you said. It's the software that's mediocre, you said.
Some of the music's wonderful. And I have no problems with people doing whatever they want on computers. My issue is, you can look at DAW software as being sort of like one of those digital candles where it's like you're holding it up and it's not really a flame, right? It's like a little light bulb that flickers.
But it has a whole bunch of things that remind you of it being a flame.
Yeah.
Even though it's not.
And so what you're doing with producing is you're giving up that flame in exchange for being able to move around everywhere very quickly and drop context and not have to really practice an instrument.
Touch the flickering part.
I'm confused. What is it that you're giving up? Are you saying that, like, for example, capturing audio digitally versus acoustically or something? That's not what you mean, right?
No, it's a good question though, and it's important to make the distinction here. You can do a lot of great art with DAW programs and with software on computers today, but unlike the violin, it does not encourage it. You have to be extremely exceptional to do anything very cool and interesting with Pro Tools or with Ableton Live, even with Max MSP and the more advanced kind of technical stuff. The reason being, all audio in a software context, it doesn't work like audio does in real life. It works by doing little samples of the wave that is coming out.
Okay. So just to break it down,
the resolution.
Just to break it down for the audience really quick. When we're talking about samples, we're talking about how many thousands of little bytes of things over a second, which is
basically little recordings.
The velocity. Yeah, little tiny recordings that, like, 48,000 of them happen over a second, usually in a DAW.
One that an analogy people would probably understand is like megapixels in a digital camera.
That's right, or resolution on a TV screen
in general.
Yeah.
So like
that's sample rate.
But then what is it? If that's not real life audio, what is real life audio? Do you mean us acoustically speaking to one another in a room?
Sure, or playing music in a
guitar
room.
amp and a drum kit and shit like that. Okay,
absolutely. Because here's the thing, right?
But also, the same problem would apply. Correct me if I'm wrong. To tape, right?
So it's the interfaces that are the problem. It's actually not the software itself, or in your case, the tape. The problem is that music is not actually. I like to joke that the new circle of fifths is Control C, Control X, Control Z, Control V.
yeah.
You're not wrong.
Control R and T.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you know what, guys? Do we actually think that's good? Is that actually what people should be learning? I don't think so. And this is my point. My point is that taking such an abstraction approach to music cheapens it, because it's supposed to be a struggle and it's supposed to be something that yields beauty, and beauty comes through sacrifice. And so in order to really make use of computers in a way that's artistically, I think, motivating and valid, you have to avoid the inputs that you use to make a computer work, a keyboard, a mouse, even a computer screen. What the hell are we doing? We're audio engineers. Why are we looking at computer screens? We shouldn't have to see anything to do our job. We should be able to do it if we're blind. And that really should make people think, I hope, that maybe something's wrong here. Maybe we're not shipping products like Pro Tools for the reasons that people think.
Is there an issue you find then with supplementing your ears with your eyes? Why is that an issue?
Actually, no, it's not an issue. And that's a good slapback, actually. But here's what I would say in response. You need to hear first, and then you see. Just like a hunter hears the deer before they shoot the deer. Our ears are instantaneously connected to both our brain and our spinal cord. The relationship that we have with audio is unique. It's really special, in fact. We have involuntary reactions to sound. And for that reason, we can't help these constraints that we have. Hearing is our life. We cannot survive without hearing and speaking. And so we have this kind of like fish in water situation in music, where we have a hard time standing back from that perspective and seeing what we're doing. We think that because music is coming out of a computer, we're making music, but we're not. We're making templates of music. We're making lo-fi scaffolds of music, and then we're filling in the details as we go. That's how music's made today.
What are the details?
Hold on. Okay,
I just want an example of what the
stop.
details are, so I can.
Let me fucking.
I just want to let him
back.
bear out this claim here.
I think he's done a great job of that so far.
no, but you said scaffolding. I understand that, but what are the details? Just for example.
Well, actually, this could go back a long distance. 440 hertz A. You know, that was not the way.
It was supposed to be 432 treatment. initially.
And a lot of people go, oh, what matters about that? But
Yngwie Malmsteen does that in fucking E flat on his guitars, and I want to smack him, but it's okay.
But here's the thing: if you play violin, you'll know what I'm talking about here. 432A is a much better tuning for a violin to play any classical music that was written up until that point.
They've changed the musical alphabet for but also lots of different cultures play in a different musical alphabet.
Or just don't even have the same treatment.
That's correct. And so like actually having localized tunings of music was the way to go. And that's homogenized now in the standard world.
For the normies out there, when I say different treatment, like we have a 12-tone treatment that was based on Helmholtz's theory. It's 12 notes in there, and different cultures have different numbers of notes that are connected and jumped to in different ways.
And so I studied Hindustani music in high school. I was a tabla player. And so I was familiar with the partial, tuning systems that they employed.
Like quarter tones
and even sometimes weirder stuff than that. But I'm also a big fan of Harry Partch, whose music system employed 48 notes. It was a diamond tonality, a tonality diamond. That's what it was. 48 different intervals. This was based on his belief that music's intervals should mimic the human voice, that all music started as voice. And for that reason, it is accurate. And it's insightful because what it shows us is someone who innovated by going back to the tradition. And I'm a free jazz guy. I got my musical start in that world where you have to respect the tradition in order to break it. And it's sacrosanct. Yeah. You have to do that.
Yeah.
So when you look at all the different ways that music gets innovated on, it always comes from a deep respect for something that's conventional already first.
If I can pause you really quick to reference your project that you released on Spotify. What's the name of that again?
Well, it's Music Ain't for Airports.
Music Ain't for Airports.
Album by the artist Sonic Multiplicities. My friend Garrett Semelink is the violinist on that. And he does a great job.
And I think that is interesting in context of you just bringing up like, these are the rules. We're going to fucking annihilate those rules. Almost like, not literally Hegel, but like quasi-Hegelian dialectic type of thing.
It's important that people get exposed to what the dangers are before they happen. And that's what music was always good about doing. It was about giving you an example of what would happen if certain things come to fruition. And with my music, I'm trying to bring a strong understanding of these issues in that the way that we compose, the way that we perform is based on a warning that we have to be very wary of giving away our sovereignty to technology companies and to artificial intelligence people. My music is made with artificial intelligence, but the way that I went about it was through first principles. And this is something that every good musician used to think about all the time. What's the first principle? What's the pedagogic approach to teaching music? That's not happening now. It's all about vanity. It's all about finding your swim lane and making your money and getting out.
You're going to hate this Ishville cover I just did. Because it is like very like digital. It's very shortcutted. It's very at the behest of not behest, but like rather the benefaction of tech companies who provided me with really nice software.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, right? The nerds are really the problem because they're very deceitful. They will make it look like they care. They will make it look like they know, but they don't. Not on either front. They don't get music and they don't want to get music. They see it as a means to an end. And that's a really bad thing because music is humanity. Music is people. It's love.
Talking the nerds designing the plugins, or are you talking about the nerds that are providing the distribution services?
It's more the latter. Most plugin developers that I know kind of get this stuff I'm talking about.
No, I'm with you there. Like I've known enough of those guys to know most of them are on the up and up and cool.
At which point, technically, I qualify as one right now. It's me and Eric are working on making plugins.
You're cool in my book no matter what, Casey.
Thanks.
Yo, can you hit me up with more of that?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Sweet. So this is the thing, guys. Like, I don't mean to hate because I actually think it's really important to like bad music too. It's really important to like ABBA. It's really important to have musical tastes that you could be made fun of for having. That's fine.
Absolutely. I fully agree.
It's, music, it's a lot like sex even. Like, you have to be willing to have a certain
For the
degree.
first few times you make it, it's just bad.
Yeah.
And you might be good at it by the end of your life, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but so what I mean to say is that like we have to realize the struggle that yields outcomes that we all feel very gratified by when they're done. And like that's going away because we haven't really stayed true to the values that music offers us. And we can see it because society is breaking down everywhere. The problem with nerds and distribution services is Spotify doesn't exist to fulfill your wildest musical fantasies.
No.
They should be that. But what they are instead is a refuge from the hectic city life that all of these suburban women that grew up in, Connecticut, New Jersey, they're now living in cities and they're terrified by living in those cities. And the only thing that gives them any recourse, any kind of feeling of safety is the fact that when they go into the subway system, they can put on Spotify and drown out all of the dangerous things that their ears are hearing, that their brain is freaking out about.
I don't think that's who Spotify had in mind when they made Spotify.
Well, no, they had in mind peer-to-peer software developers because that used to be what Spotify's business model was. They let you do file sharing. No one remembers
Really?
that. Yeah, in
did not know
college,
that.
everybody has Spotify app open, and all we did was listen to each other's record libraries.
That's dope.
And that's no longer, of course, what they do. And they were being
Thanks,
very, they were being cynical when they took that approach. They understood that you can grow very rapidly, like Napster did, if you employ that kind of a feature. So no, Spotify did not start out that way, but I got kicked out of the Spotify New York City headquarters for giving a presentation there on why Spotify is the nail in the coffin for jazz. They killed all of the most sophisticated music that will
what's your thoughts
ever
as to
be
why?
made there.
What's your thoughts as to why they killed jazz? Because I believe it was Rick Beato made a video about this that I thought was very interesting.
Free jazz. It was where jazz was. It was very radical, and it was embracing a return to tradition and tribalism through sophistication, through achievement. It was also yielding really powerful and intellectually influential Black people for the first time in a long while in American culture. And I don't mean that in a hateful way. I mean that in the sense that like it was the last time that a truly genuine multiracial, gender musical culture was allowed to flourish. And then only mere years after Ornette Coleman hits the scene, we get Kenny G.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We, I think, needed to pacify the civilian population in order to get away with the warfare of the 1990s. I don't think that a radicalized youth, which was what free jazz and the avant-garde yielded, would have ever given us the safety that we needed.
Let's say that again.
We needed safety in our mentality in order to do war in the 90s. We had to be able to kind of put it behind us. That's how the first Iraq War was able to happen, Desert Storm. And at that point, look at the music that was being made.
Yeah, what year was that?
92, 93.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you're going to say about it. I mean, that's one of my favorite eras of music.
That's right.
Okay.
And it was...
That's my point. We were escaping into that music. That was the last time we were allowed to.
Plastic and decadent. It was plastic and decadent for sure.
Fair enough. That might be a better way to put it. It was a different kind of value that we were looking at.
Super fucking plastic. You kidding me?
So
92, 93?
We were getting into grunge, remember?
That was grunge.
Grunge is when we're starting to come out of that shit.
So yes, but I mean, I think the cultural moments overlap. But the point is
that's a fair point.
That was actually.
So he's thinking of the '80s rock music, and I'm thinking it was grunge. That was what mattered at that time.
Well, I think it was grunge because
right.
And it was the existence of grunge plus plasticky, kind of poppy landscape. A lot like
the Full House '80s intro.
A lot like how punk and disco hated each other.
Yeah.
That is another period of time that was rife with warfare that no one noticed in the United States.
Oh.
The music industry as a whole, and you'll see this if you read my awesome shirt, musicforall.club, everybody that was big in music during the hippie era, the 70s, had military backgrounds. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Without exception. And it's not because, as people sometimes like to say, everybody was in World War II or whatever. And no. Jim Morrison's father was like an admiral in the Navy.
Oh, there's a whole thing about Jim Morrison being a CIA plant because of all that shit.
That's right. And Avril Lavigne, Canadian CIA equivalent plant. Most of the big music in even our childhoods, promoting mall culture, promoting hatred of the family unit, those were government operations. We know that now.
We know that now.
We do. We do. And
damn, dude.
We do. And
you're dropping some really spicy bombs that we need to stop for a second, my man. We need to at least push back on this. For sure.
Go ahead.
Well, no, just substantiate the claims is all. I mean, yeah, we know that. Come on. I don't. Explain. Convince me. I'm Joe Rogan. And you're Graham Hancock.
Oh, boy. So I'm gay and tall?
Yeah. Is he gay?
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know.
That'd be awesome.
He's actually,
I hope he's gay.
He's a cool dude.
He's
so
great.
I didn't mean anything by that.
Oh yeah,
of course, of course.
Yeah, so we know that what you're for example, you're referring to pop punk, new metal.
Yeah.
Marilyn Manson is one of my favorite artists probably ever.
Sure. Hey, did you guys ever see the MTV Music Video Awards where Marilyn Manson played live on TV for the first time?
Yeah, I'm sure I've seen it. I mean, I'm a huge fan of his. I just don't remember which of the many videos live of him that I've seen was that.
Give it a
one.
look. It was the first. They billed it as this, and on MTV during the Music Video Awards, he was going and playing shows on tour, but he hadn't been televised yet because everyone knew what his deal was, but they hadn't yet seen it. And so when MTV had the Music Video Awards, I think it was '94, Marilyn Manson did their first televised performance, and it was sick. It was so cool. You'll never see, I'm sorry to say this, because I also was a fan of his. You'll never see a performance like that from him in any other circumstance.
Really?
Yeah, man. Because it was the only time he was allowed to truly be himself. It was the only time he was allowed to do music his way.
So what, yeah, I mean, I hate to talk shit because he is a huge part of my artistic identity, certainly lyrically, aesthetically, everything. We have mutual, I can't say who, but mutual family friends. And yeah, I don't like his recently. Yeah, like for the last 10 years, I don't think he's just not mattered.
But see, that's the thing.
I mean, he matters, but
he matters. And it's important that we study him because we can get insights into what not to do if you want to do what he was trying to do. Because he did succeed at doing, I would say, one, maybe two very subversive records. And this is in an environment that was heavily controlled by the U.S. government and the intelligence agencies.
Are you talking about the first two? Antichrist Superstar, I would argue, that was the third,
very
right? Subversive. That's the second, I think.
That was the second. So
it was technically the third, but not really.
The Antichrist Superstar and the one before that.
Portrait of an American Family with cake and sodomy on it and all that. Yeah.
See, that's the thing. It brought people into a dark side, right? Even with cake.
Yeah.
But so no, my point in bringing him up, the evidence is all around us to see, and the way that governments have yielded music for evil. And so to get back to that initial pushback,
can you give some?
Yeah, could you just give the evidence
give some examples here?
Yeah. What's the canyon called in California where everybody hung out? Laurel Canyon. There's several very good books. Jay Dyer's written a few that I would strongly recommend reading. The proven now through declassified documents, motivation for the hippie movement was to offset the anti-war protests against Vietnam. So they designed a culture that looked ridiculous and silly and discredited legitimate anti-war voices, people like Noam Chomsky. And so we were being subjected to things like LSD, which again was something that they thought was going to be able to be used for mind control. They turned it around.
That's actually verified that the CIA was trying to, for lack of a better term, experiment.
There's no evidence that it actually worked, but that they tried.
It did not work in terms of what their hypothesis stated in the research documents. But what they did learn was the profound impact that music had on people when they were in that state.
Yeah.
And so what they did was they leveraged that knowledge because they had it before anybody else, just like the Federal Reserve leverages the newly created dollars before anybody else, right? To take advantage of people's naivety and of their goodwill. And so we have this good attachment to music as humans. We can't avoid it. And so the government knows that if they need to get a message across, every government knows this since the Catholic Church was formed originally. You do it through music. If you need to convince somebody and deceive them, you do it with music. That's what it's done with.
You wouldn't say art as well. I mean, like, for example, the propaganda that is called the Sistine Chapel. You know, they paid, what's his name, to paint all
Michelangelo.
Gloria. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
It's
but it was propaganda.
work.
It was paid for by the church.
Yeah, it's propaganda. Just like every incredible work of classical music is Christian propaganda too. And I'm not going to discredit Mozart or Bach or Mahler or Beethoven. Well, Beethoven's an exception. He was a romantic. He was not being held up by a religious figure. He was his patron was a duke. He was not a religious person. He also made very unique music.
He did some masses, but like it wasn't like what he's known
Beethoven.
for.
Oh yeah.
What's that?
He did some masses, but it's like not what he was known for.
I wish I got Beethoven. Like,
oh, he's so
one of those composers who everyone is just loves, and I'm just like I don't really like him that much.
You never heard the Ninth Symphony?
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I've heard. I've tried so hard. I just I don't know. With classical, I like Shostakovich, Prokofiev.
Hey, that's great stuff, man.
I like the 20th century. The more dissonant, dangerous stuff is my favorite. Easy. It's the it's the Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum of its time.
Serial music was really big for that era, and it's a good example of when you innovate with process and how that yields incredible results that we don't do anymore.
Podcasts ago, we were talking shit on serialism.
I'm not talking shit. Serialism is dank, man.
I don't know
it.
what that is. What is that?
Serialism is
12-tone serial approach to.
Oh, you mean
writing.
You can't play the pitch until you play every you can't play one pitch again until you play the other 11? Okay, yeah.
Imposing certain kind of specific blockers for musical exploration actually has sort of the opposite effect that you would expect. It yields more new kinds of creativity.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do with my music bring AI into the mix to see how do you respond to those challenges that AI systems throw at you in music. And so serialism.
Oh, is that how you're? Okay, so we'll get onto that. But yeah, okay, I didn't quite understand until just now. So go ahead. Yeah, serialism.
Well, so my point being that even when you don't like the results, you have to respect the game and the study and the practice of what they're doing, which is that they're trying to do new things. Because again, music is supposed to show you what will happen or could happen, not what already has happened. Music demands pushing the envelope. Otherwise, we don't enjoy it anymore.
I would definitely push back on that. And the reason being, music has a multifaceted function, but one of its functions is resolving cognitive dissonance. At least, okay, that's
Perlovsky's theory.
Yeah, Perlovsky's theory. It's not technically fucking proven yet, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest
I buy into it.
Yeah, I buy it kind of too. I don't know if you're familiar.
I am.
Yeah, okay.
The ear is the organ that gives confirmation to all the other senses.
Yeah.
Because it is first, like I mentioned earlier.
First, I don't understand.
It's the thing that we perceive and act on first of all the senses.
Light travels faster than sound, though.
Yeah, but our ears are much more connected to our spinal cord and our brain than our eyes are. Even though our eyes are part of our brain, our ears are the only sensory organ that has a direct connection to the spinal cord.
I would say, like, if you heard a car,
I don't really know why that's an argument, but
if you heard a car crash, your body would either like tense up really quick or you turn your head immediately. Versus if you saw a car crash ahead of you, it takes a second to get the coordination to move your fucking feet.
Yeah, Casey, your pushback is based on again like the fish and water issue. It's hard to envision a life or even a perception of the world without this inherent skill that we all have as humans.
Yeah.
Which is the inevitable, highly accurate, not easy to fool ears that we have. And so because of that, music is critical to our longevity and survival. It's the only way that we can pass time in a way that's like universally positive. Everything else in the world dies when time goes on, but music grows as time goes on. That's an awesome
it's
trait.
Supposed to.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Well, the prior sounds in music that were heard before the current thing you're hearing all contribute to the experience, but entropy is actually the normal
I see what you're saying.
aspect of life.
Oh, gotcha.
Music fights that.
Wouldn't you just say ideas in general are resistant to entropy because they're not physical things?
No, entropy is in ideas too. It's
That's
not in
very
music,
true.
though.
Especially if you look at how history repeats itself, it certainly is entropic. Yeah.
I don't understand what about music renders it immune to entropy that ideas otherwise would be.
Because again, music's goal is to give you a vision of what could be, not what is. And so its intent, the reason that it's valuable to us is because it represents other things that we could perceive and understand.
I'm going to have to push back with you on that
I'm going to need him to explain that because you've said it several times.
Hey, hold on.
And there's so many things that you're saying that I feel need elaboration. And I'm just kind of, I'm letting you go for a while so you can kind of paint the picture here.
Well,
but that's the next thing I'm going to have to have you explain because that music is clairvoyant in some way, or I like that. I could kind of see what you're saying, but I want to make sure I'm getting it right because I don't want to misunderstand.
Well, you don't know what music means when you hear it.
We are okay. So that's something I harp on a ton. Is that music is semantically ambiguous sound?
Semantically, yes, yeah, it is.
Semantically ambiguous.
Yes, yeah. It's supposed to touch you emotionally with its effect.
But how?
Okay, that's a great question.
It's through time progression, and that's my point.
Okay,
it achieves this.
Wait.
It definitely requires time.
I want to digest that for a second. When you say time progression, you mean like literally a song is rhythmically placed sound in time?
I think you mean vibration.
Are you talking about over the time of culture, or are you talking about both?
Well, that's a good question. I'm referring to the former, which is music is not a sound medium. We don't make music by making sound. Sound is not the mechanism of music. It's time. It's the progression of time.
That's real fucking ballsy.
It's true.
You I can have to think about that. God damn it.
Music.
Okay, just explain it. Yeah.
John Zorn is a composer that I was very fortunate to know when I was growing up in New York City, and he's proved this to me via another person that you'll certainly know and love, Mike Patton, who subscribes to this very hard. That music's main currency is not the sounds that you're making with your instrument and with your voice. It's the decisions that you are making throughout the progression of time. And again, to go back to what else happens when time progresses? Well, in almost everything else in the world, time causes entropy. And even in music, it also causes entropy by the wave dispersion. When sound happens, waves travel and they get weaker and weaker as they go further and further.
Loses energy.
But the concepts artistically grow over time. The longer music is going, the more context that you can associate with it. And so performing music over a period of time leads to enhanced outcomes, whereas almost everything else in the world over time gets lessened.
Okay, so you don't mean necessarily within a 3-minute content. Well, you do.
It could be.
Or it could be a decade.
If I'm a math rock artist, I'm probably trying to make very meaningful changes in time every couple seconds.
Yeah.
If I'm John Zorn, at the time that I first discovered him, he was really big on kind of like the Mr. Bungle thing, where he's changing genres like every 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And that's meaningful modification of time. That's using time as a compositional tool. That's indeed the basis of all music. Music is ritualistic in its beginnings, and it's all based on the movement of the sun is when performances of music happened. So it's in our history and it's in our physics.
Well,
Music is a thing that grows.
It is baked into our instincts. Like,
Yes.
okay, so part of Perlovsky's theory is pulling off of other people's work, which is proto-humans have had a proto-vocalization that was much more similar to animals. We have a differentiated psyche now between I forget exactly what it was, but I want to say it's like the communication side that's a synthesis and differentiation. That's what it is.
Yep.
We have a differentiated side between synthesis and differentiation. I think that's correct. And animals have that integrated immediately. So when animals vocalize, they are utilizing both sides of their brain. But when we vocalize, as in talking language, we're only using the differentiation side of the brain. And the synthesis side of the brain was necessary. It needed some compensation in order to have the cohesive psyche process, and that's where music came from. That's kind of the thought. So the proto vocalizations were both music and semantic type of stuff at the same time.
So I would take I detour from that a bit in the sense that my current theory is that music came about from the discovery of fire. And I think it's an indication of civilization. It's similar.
I mean, it could literally be both.
That's what I mean. In many ways, this overlaps, but there's a clear distinction in what I'm thinking these days, which is that the motivation for music was boredom. We were, for the very first time, able to sit and think for ourselves, and as a result of the control of fire. And what it gave us was basically a need to do things at nighttime and a way to keep people by the fire, to keep them safe. Kids. And then, so like the elderly use storytelling. They're physically not as capable musicians, right? As like a younger person would be. So youthful adults would be the musicians in the tribe. The elderly would be the storytellers. And it's all basically in an effort to keep kids and other people who might just run away because they're not as smart, near safety, near civilization. Music is a drug that keeps you inside of civilization.
If I can, I agree with you that it can be used for those practical means.
It's what it was used for.
But okay, I believe
in the beginning.
Totally with you.
It's at least what I think.
I think that that magic drug thing that we're talking about is more fundamental, if that makes any sense.
More fundamental than music?
No, like that more fundamental as to the why or what of music, because regardless of what the practical application is, it still does touch meaning within you. It is that since the Perlovsky thing, the idea is music aids in the synthesis process, since we are so overbound with differentiation.
Shows you what could be. It generates innovation and ideation.
It literally removes the cognitive dissonances of the shitloads of information that we're gathering, because our differentiation is so strong, which is what made us dominate the earth. But we would have destroyed ourselves if we had all these dissonances we didn't know how to resolve. So music is there to boost the synthesis side and help us better learn how to integrate, to synthesize all this new information we're gathering.
It's an interesting perspective on a very, very big question, right?
But which also touches meaning when you do that. When you synthesize, you touch meaning. I'm
not of the belief that music gives you meaning. And in fact, I think it's impossible to assess meaning of even music you make yourself. That's kind of the magic aspect to it. My belief is actually that music is a motivator. It gives you something to reach for, something to dream for, and ideate. And it's something that allows you, in many ways, similarly to how social media works, allows you to escape the moment of hardship and envision a brighter future. And it's probably why all major religions succeeded through their use of music as a kind of a means for propagandizing their.
Early
very
followers.
successfully marrying the harmony with the ideology.
Early Christian music was fucking dope, though. I'm just saying,
it's awesome. I mean, imagine if everybody heard
fire.
Gregorian chant every Sunday when they went to church or whatever, right?
Imagine.
Way
better.
Yeah,
way
the
better.
world would be way better.
Or even like the Orthodox Church drones and shit. That shit's fire. So good.
It's an embrace of the tradition, and what they do in so
Amen.
doing that is they yield modern versions of that tradition to keep it going. And that's an example of localized music.
The Halo theme.
Yeah.
Take a step back for a second. And after hearing everything that we've just talked about, now let's go back to the question, though, about the music industry. What the fuck are those clowns doing?
Making money.
This is what's going on with music. And we know that there's profound stuff going on in music. And all they can think to fucking do is take Fergie songs and sample them on top of new, stupid mumblecore hip hop shit. They don't even have an inkling of interest in helping us be better people. They have no interest in that.
I fully
where
agree.
does the responsibility lie in those trends, do you think?
Well,
who's this they, in other words?
If it were the Frank Zappa
you're asking
quotation,
who the they is. Got you.
Yeah,
if you're asking about like back in the day, right? It was
CIA.
It's the music failures that ended up taking over the music industry.
I'm a little.
And they then went to work for the CIA.
These people that are able to kind of find positions and labels and being A&R and stuff like that, they're easily manipulated because, of course, they went into a field that they knew was very risky, and they clearly didn't do it for the right reasons because they gave up.
Great point. I will also say I think and you're probably getting towards this. I think there's a little blame to go around a lot of places. If that makes any sense.
The consumer, especially. Yes.
Definitely.
I think maybe most fundamentally, and I don't know how this could possibly be escaped, is just a socioeconomic paradigm that derives value from scarcity. Unfortunately, like and any normal leftist would call that capitalism or something. Obviously, I'm not going to do that. It's more fundamental than any ism, likely.
So. Creativity is infinite, I'm pretty sure. But our energy's not.
Literally. Okay. Yeah. We are fundamentally scarce entities.
That's our challenge.
Yeah. That's what my theory is for why we value that which is scarce, because it's our way of trying to justify our mortality. And perhaps if we ever solve for mortality and we don't die, maybe we will have a shifting value system.
It's actually this kind of outcome that I think is going to contribute to the death of music. Because once we have no mastery or concerns about mastery, rather, over time, what good is the manipulation of time to the human species?
Okay, so that was the next
Very
thing.
interesting.
That was what I was going to ask you. Is
maybe I could push back.
Is that
there's the ability to appreciate the moment, but that's
Sure.
going to be explored later. But go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. If your assertion was that the basis of music is time and not sound, and that they're not equal parts, then wouldn't that mean that there could be music without sound?
That's what I was hoping you were getting to. Okay, can you explain that?
Talk about that.
Please explain that.
John
I'm very
Zorn's
curious.
first musical compositions out of like high school were the theater of musical optics, and his proposal was that you could take visual cues and execute them musically without making any sound, and that it would be perceived as music. I was lucky enough to be able to go to one of these concerts. He holds them at his apartment in Lower East Side.
I've heard about this. Yeah, like there was no sound that took place at these, right? Yeah. Okay, so yeah. Go ahead.
Are you aware of these things?
Go ahead. Not as much as I should be.
So I was lucky enough to be at the Halloween performance of one of these concerts. And what he does is he goes around Lower East Side and he picks up found objects. And he basically applies light as the rhythm. And so he'll put everybody in his kitchen, put all these found objects on his kitchen table, and then turn out all the lights, make it pitch black in there. And he's got a little desk lamp.
As if the volume's at 0.
Yeah. And then he's modifying the light power, and he's manipulating the placement of these found objects. And this is what the theater of musical optics is. It's the use of modulation of time to achieve an artistic vision that is musical, but which does not make sound.
So wait, how's it music?
Yeah.
Then if it's just lights moving in rhythm, because it's rhythm. Is that why it was? It's not. It's just it's atonal. Well,
Rhythm,
not atonal, but no tonal.
Rhythm is an important facet to this because it is the basis of music, right? Like everything was drumming and dancing and singing.
Again, why isn't it rhythm
ask,
and why not melody? Like what? I don't understand.
Melody is a much more sophisticated concept, and it takes a lot more IQ, basically, to be able to leverage control over it.
Sure.
Rhythm is a extremely innate thing that every human has.
I can see how that would come first, yeah.
I mean, there are some animals who can do that too, like to a limited degree.
Yes, actually. And
birds fucking destroy that shit.
But see, bird song is not music, and I'll explain why. But before that,
okay.
The rhythm sounds have lower register frequencies. And like I was saying before, the ear connects directly to the spinal cord and it yields reactions to sounds that we can't help. Like it's in our innate, human identity. And so if you think about how a drum sounds and what frequencies are conjured up by hitting a drum, it's actually very low frequency impact sounds, right? What some people call the transient, right?
Yeah, the fundamental, yeah.
And what that leads to is an involuntary response in us. We can't help it. And so all music was either singing or drumming.
Yep.
Singing was what gave way to melody. Drumming is what gave way to rhythm. Drumming gave way to rhythm, which gave way to dance.
Well, if we're talking about pitched versus non-pitched, that would be the thing.
Okay, but how does this circle back to it's music, even though there's no sound, there's just lights?
Right. Well, so the fundamental thing that every musician works with when they do a performance or when they compose music, it's deciding when to do something.
Yeah.
It's the one constant. From beat 1 to beat 2, you might still be playing the same note that you were playing initially, but you chose to. You didn't take your finger off the string. You didn't take your finger off the piano key. That's a musical decision, but it's based on a timing decision. That's it. So all of music gets boiled down to what is done at specific moments of time.
Yeah. Okay.
I still think
again, without sound,
I still think you can't unbake the sound from it.
Yeah. I don't understand. Is it because you can imagine what it could be or something? I don't know.
No. So what it is actually, and this
maybe cool if the phenomenon was ideation.
It's a great question, actually, because what it is, it's a new way to envision how the concepts of music in the tradition can be employed in a new way that's extremely modern. Zorn's ideas are based on his experience sitting in front of the TV for 6 hours a day. I
can do that.
He loves cartoons. He loves cartoon music. He loves Looney Tunes. His interests in music are in the kind of, and this is actually a great exercise to do, okay? Imagine you're watching Looney Tunes on your TV, like when you were 10, right? Imagine now that you could turn the video off, but keep the music going, the sound. Would the music in Looney Tunes make any sense? Would you be able to hear and understand what's going on? No, because without the visual, it's just a crazy piece of music. With all these
a dope piece of music,
dope and extremely interesting and unlike anything else you've heard before at that time. And so Zorn points out here that music's innate qualities are they're hidden by the fact that time moves always. Time is sort of like this immovable thing that none of us can escape.
Is there a paper that you can suggest that we read by Zorn?
Zorn has published a number of books called Arcana. It's a series of texts, basically a collection of essays written by other musicians.
Fucking alchemist, like
he loves alchemy.
Okay,
but is what he does. He assembles these essays from other musicians that talk about music and making music. Okay. And I would strongly recommend that you check it out, because if you want to really dive deep into what the tradition of music is, it's about how we choose to use our time. It's also what civilizes humans, and it's what yields success in humans.
I understand. I just don't understand how it isn't also, in order to qualify as music, the choice of the wielding of time with sound.
Yes. So like if you listen to it,
I just can't, I don't understand.
A lot of Zorn's music, right? A lot of people will hear it and they will hate it. And they will not see it as being a blessed approach to making modern music with traditional ideas.
You're talking about the no sound music.
I'm talking about a lot of his music. It's just very intense stuff. A lot of stuff that sounds like some of the stuff your band does. And a lot of the other stuff is modern classical. And even so, one of my favorite records from him is called The Fire Book, where it's literally just solo saxophone for an hour. And so my point is that just like in free jazz and other kinds of challenging music, the modality that's used to present the ideas.
You don't mean harmonic modes, right?
No, I mean like the traditional approach is being destroyed by making visuals the elements of music as opposed to the sound. Like, and a lot of people can't sit and listen to Mr. Bungle. They can't even do it, right? Yeah. Like Mike Patton's voice is just intolerable. But that's another example of a kind of music that, like the theater of musical optics, people won't understand usually. Unless they really devote themselves to sitting there and understanding it and really thinking deeply about it. And that's actually the problem that we have in culture today, is that if you want to do challenging things like this, Zorn barely eked by. Mike Patton, he's lucky to even be alive, frankly, okay? There's never going to be another example of that kind of success in taking something profoundly new and different and making it musical. Just like Patton's screaming became basically literal opera when he went into Fantomas. And so like, that's what we don't have anymore in music. That's what they're trying to kill. And by they, I do mean not just consumers, not just the government, but musicians themselves. You and I, we're all part of this problem.
You mean wittingly trying to kill?
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say I don't think musicians are,
or just like I like music and I need to pay the fucking bills. God damn it!
Yeah, that's
I guess
thing.
I have to do something that doesn't take any risks,
right?
Because otherwise, I'm not going to get no one's likelihood of people liking it is going to be lower. Likelihood of people buying it or anyone investing in my promotion, whatever it is.
I would
making it matter in the
from
world,
a consumer standpoint. Or am I gonna take an hour to try and understand what the fuck I'm listening to, or do I want something that immediately is going to make me think less about my shitty workday? Like,
again, Spotify basically astroturfing over the bad experiences you're having on a day-to-day basis. Music is a very powerful way to get that done.
You were talking about,
because it's like the wisdom that you gain through challenging listening experiences is what arms you with what you need to tolerate the banality and monotony and horrific suffering of living.
I think there's a mix. I think there's a mix of both there.
Man.
Can I touch back really quick?
Sure.
You said you thought Spotify contributed to the destruction of jazz.
Yes.
You didn't finish that though. What was your reason for that? Because there's another portion that I think is interesting to bring into this, but I want to know what your thought was on that.
Well, it's interesting, right? We were talking about what makes music music.
Sound.
To me, it's time, and it's choosing to do with your time what you do.
But what about choosing with time and sounds?
Spotify.
Okay, sorry.
Spotify actually removes this from music, right? Because what does Spotify do? Spotify removes intentionality from music because their intent is to get you to listen to their, automated constructed playlists. They don't want you making.
Their intent is to sell as much ads as possible. They want screen time on that fucking app. That's what they want.
Well, of course.
But you don't see or hear ads if you pay.
Either way, guys, not important to this.
Okay, sorry.
It's fine. This is the way I would phrase it. Spotify is trying to minimize the friction that exists in deciding to put headphones on your body,
definitely,
and make music go through them and have you hear it. The entire intent behind it is to make thinking about it lesser and having outcomes be more guaranteed.
They want to outcompete the ease of radio, which they've already beaten to hell.
Yes, they have. And Pandora as well, which used to be the reigning champ before Spotify. So this was a business metric that they were trying to pursue. But then think about how this applies to music, right? This means basically the idea of the culture behind record stores, behind music having scenes is eviscerated.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, record stores are fucking destroyed.
They're a disgusting disgrace compared to what I grew up with seeing in Lower Manhattan.
I mean, even the guitar stores starting to die.
Those are so much fun. Yeah, I miss those.
And so, why do we miss them? Because music is culture, it's creativity, it's community.
It's social. Yeah. It's
Yuka talked about this on your other episode, and I was so there with him. And he's right. Everybody should do what I do all day in music, which is enable other people's success by being there with them. I'm a drummer. That's how I got started in music. And so every day was me dreaming, how can I envision a way to make people be set up for success? I'm the drummer. I need to make everyone cohesive. I need to enable a funky groove that can enable, yes, improvisations and awesome jams and whatever. Right? This is like the 15-year-old mind thinking about this question.
Tying it back to Spotify.
Spotify does not do any of this. They're not interested in your success. They're interested in doing exactly what you said that they're doing. And because of this, they are removing the element of time from musical experience because they are removing the need to make decisions by the listener.
So I would consider, okay, so I guess there's two ways of thinking about that. They're removing opportunity cost by reducing the amount of time to have a quote unquote satisfying listening experience.
That doesn't negate what I'm saying. I think it's actually probably true as well, what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah. But okay, so how does that factor into the they're going against the heart of what music is, which is time? How does that factor into it?
How does it factor into killing jazz, right?
Yeah.
What is jazz all about? It's about improvisation. It's about structured improvisation.
I'd say that's the heart of a lot of jazz.
Yes. And it's also the basis from which all innovation in jazz kind of starts.
Yes. Okay, that's true.
And so if you think about those conditions of jazz, that is the evil villain of Spotify, because Spotify is trying to provide an experience where no one has to be bothered to put any thought into the experience they're about to have. And all of recorded music used to demand that from you. You used to have to very intentionally go to the record shelf, pull the thing out. And I'm not saying that these developments are even necessarily bad, but we have to acknowledge the reality of them. So what is Spotify doing? They're making it so that basically all music is a podcast.
Can I push back on? I know what he's getting at there. Can I push back on two things?
Sure.
Okay. And I'm not fully disagreeing with you, but I think you may be placing too much onus on Spotify alone, because based upon what I think about jazz, I think it is primarily a live art.
Sure.
And I think recorded music is not the best format by a long shot to experience jazz.
You're right that it's often not the best, and it frequently isn't. However, recorded music is essential. It's essential for jazz. You don't have jazz without records. Vinyl records, here's why. Vinyl records are big and they have lots of information on them. Mm-hmm. If you're a fan of Bill Evans, you don't just listen to the Bill Evans records. You get the Miles Davis records, and you get all the other stuff.
I like Miles Davis.
So you need to be able to read the credits.
You got to be able to get the advertising to know that this is the thing that you're a fan of. And even though he's not the band leader, right? So the whole idea of jazz was a sort of essential language that everybody could speak and use to communicate with each other, just like vinyl records used to be in music. In Spotify's case, what they've done is removed that element of the musical community from the experience, because what they've prioritized is not the community. They actually want you in a silo. They want you underground in a bunker, not connected or talking to anybody else, because all they want to do is
probably more a byproduct than anything else.
No, it's all about the data collection, because all of their AI is trained up on the decisions made by users. But
without a doubt, yeah.
But the problem is that there's fewer and fewer opportunities on Spotify to make decisions. So what do you do when that's your problem? Well, you get into a stasis where nothing happens and all music sounds the same now for 5 years, 6 years.
I guess you could argue that Spotify, if they really cared, could try and technologically innovate a way to bring back the contemporary equivalent of bringing back a few records from the store sitting on the couch with your friends and just listening to them.
Yeah.
But they have no incentive to do that other than the love of music, which let's not pretend,
Well, this is my problem about the industrialization of music, which is that it does not actually yield incentives that play to the values and strengths of music. It's devaluing music's actual ability to make a positive impact on people's lives and on society. And so, when you look at Spotify, they're nerds. They don't care about music. They care about the way that music can be a vessel for deceiving people.
I don't think the CEO gives one fuck about music. Nope. If he was owning a taco company that did the same thing, he'd be happy.
People.
All music can be either used to embrace optimism and nice visions of the future, or even just adventurous ideas, right? And what Spotify would like to have music be is the same for the rest of time, because that makes their job a lot easier. If their AI only has to handle a very small, narrow swim lane of possibilities that everybody who pays for Spotify is going to love, right? Or at least accept, then they don't have a hard problem to solve, and they can be the victors and they can take over.
Can I also throw one more thing at you about how Spotify, I think, did accidentally do a lot of damage to jazz?
Sure.
So Spotify is a Swedish company.
Yes.
And Epidemic Sound is also a Swedish company. And they have a parent company who Epidemic Sound and their parent company license like royalty-free music type of shit.
Yeah.
But Spotify hired them to basically pay a whole bunch of these very talented European jazz musicians to do a ton of jazz standards that so they don't have to pay any royalties out to anyone. There's no performance royalties, and there's no copyright royalties. So they have all of this jazz standard music that's like all very samey, playing on Spotify constantly, and there's no opportunity for, I shouldn't say no, but there's less opportunity for guys up and coming to break in on the jazz scene, because why would Spotify want to pay out royalties on a streaming rev when they could just collect that money? That's what they would do.
Jazz is dealing with a problem that in high school and in college I called the saxophonization of the guitar.
I'm really curious on this.
So it's exactly the thing you're referring to here, which is that if
credit
they
to
can,
Rick Beato for getting that story out about Spotify and Epidemic Sound. Sorry, continue.
So like when you look at what Spotify's business model is, it's about synthesizing recommendations based on user activity and based on the current cultural trends of the day. And jazz actually fights that idea pretty strongly by saying, no, you're here right now and you're only going to hear this now. This is scarce as fuck, is what they're saying. Spotify revels in removing scarcity from music.
Yeah.
So the value of pursuing new, interesting improvisations is lessened, because if that's what the music listening audience is consuming music through, then there's no patterns or workflows by which people can generate culture and new kind of innovations, because there's no reason to do it.
I'm conflicted on that, because I feel like it's a more nuanced circumstance, because when you do have this extreme level of supply, for lack of a better term, it also yields much higher competition, which is why it's not difficult to write a good pop song, but it's exceedingly difficult to write a hit pop song.
You have to be a genius.
I don't even think you have to be a genius. Like you can just get lucky and just tap into a moment, honestly, accidentally tap into a zeitgeist.
That happens, but I really do believe most musical minds, like Michael Jackson is
at very least a dancing and vocal genius.
Oh God, have you seen him on the Oprah show beatboxing and doing his bass line and two melodies at the same time? Have you seen that, man?
No, but I need to.
Michael Jackson, by the way, is Mozart of our era, and he did not diddle those kids.
I mean, besides the kid diddling part, That to me has not been resolved. I don't have an opinion one way or the other. But as far as the Mozart, that's a really strong statement. That's
my point there actually is that he fully embraced modernity and still gave us a vision for the future, just like Mozart did during his time. And
how much of that is Michael and how much of that is Quincy Jones?
No. It's all Michael. Okay. And you can see this in his childhood appearances on anything. He's an adult at 5 years old.
Yeah.
It kind of fucking had to be.
No, he was, and then that led to what I'm telling you. You can't develop that, especially at that age.
I'll take your word for it.
But so my point though about the jazz thing and about streaming, really what I'm talking about is streaming, right?
Yeah,
it's removing the incentive to provide people with original things that won't happen again.
Digital music in the age of the internet. Essentially,
say one more time.
It's streaming actually specifically. So I will say it again. Yeah. Streaming has a deleterious impact on any music that uses scarcity as a way to provide its cultural momentum. So you can look at this in jazz, which is an extremely easy thing to see.
Wouldn't recordings in general do that then?
No, because if you are consuming your music today via peer-to-peer file sharing, you don't have this problem. I have a 5 or 6 terabyte music collection in my house, and it runs on a server in my basement. And I get to enjoy the benefits. Half of it is free jazz. I enjoy the benefits of the music culture that died with things like Spotify because I didn't have to make that sacrifice. I continue to have a culture. I continue to have a community, but more importantly, I had to make a decision to commit hard drive space to this music. And it's the same decision we make when we buy a record and we put it in the shelf. It's the same modality. I'm sorry?
How do you access the music?
What.cd? Oh no, are you asking how to play it or?
Yeah, like what, like I'm assuming you probably have a method to access it when you're not home.
I actually don't. Intentionally.
Oh, okay, so you're okay, so that's the question. So you're sacrificing the convenience of music anywhere on your mobile device.
I could do it. I choose not to.
I'm aware. Yeah, I'm very aware you could.
So like my problem is I want to be deeply concentrating and appreciating what I'm hearing when it's music that I care about. Yeah. And I don't believe that it's correct to want to motivate people to enjoy music on the subway to forget about the crazy homeless guy next to them jacking off on the seat next to them. Right.
Yeah, my friend Anthony makes this distinction between
this man's jacking off on the subway. He was a free jazz musician.
No,
but Spotify.
between he's gonna fucking crucify me if I try to do this. So it might just be best that we wait till he's on. But when you're not paying attention to music and it's there kind of to function as a mirror or to give you to meet your expectations or whatever it is, and it's not challenging and you're not paying attention, it's something that I think that experience is one of what he would call junk art versus art. I cannot wait for you to meet him when he visits and is on our podcast, whenever that is. He wrote a book called Junk Art about this.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm not completely disagreeing with you, but I think that music can be multifunctional.
Yes.
And
it's just
I don't think it's healthy to make it so precious that the only time you should engage with it is when you can devote full focus to it.
Well, that's how everybody had to engage with music.
Honestly, though, I wish it was. I wish it was shut the fuck up. There's a song playing.
You wish everyone was like you, Casey.
No, so I mean, think about the average person 500 years ago only heard music during religious services, and that's if they were lucky. In fact, music was really the way that religion even worked in the first place. God, according to the Catholics, is a sound. I mean, that's initially what God was, according to most people.
Or fucking Eru from Silmarillion.
Yeah, there was.
I love that creation myth.
There was Yahweh, Oaspi, a bunch of different
Waspine. I didn't know God was a Presbyterian.
my point being that sound was seen as somewhat holy, and it definitely is a rallying call. You can get people to rally around whatever you're doing if you deploy music as a means to get people there. And so
hence art or music being the greatest force for cultural change, not politics.
Yeah, that's true actually, but for a different reason than that. But sure. So like my point, I guess, is like when you look at what music does for us, it challenges us. It's supposed to make us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And even when it makes us comfortable, we take comfort in the discomfort that we are receiving. That's the beauty of music. It's the only way.
I still don't even think it's supposed to make you uncomfortable.
See, it does, because time passes and you're not doing anything. You know, you're having to think about at a very high resolution what you just heard and synthesize that with what you're hearing now, because you're forcing yourself to understand this thing. It's like the highest resolution art experience you can have. You must apply intent to it. And if you don't, you will end up in a place where you don't understand culture anymore. And that's often how, you know, like the boomers get so out of touch with stuff, is because they lose that connection that music
want to talk about
bridges.
We want to talk about fucking boomers and their god awful fucking music taste a lot of the times. Like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Because the government made all that music happen. The Doors, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, the Beatles.
About that,
the government made the Beatles. All right.
Yeah, actually, it was MI6 and the CIA that gave John Lennon and Paul McCartney their first experience and their only experience with LSD. People think
that was their only experience?
Yes. People think for some reason that the Beatles are these huge druggies that just took a bunch of fucking drugs all day, every day. No. They're professional musicians who played their asses off for under the impression before they got famous.
I was under the impression, I mean, I know through stories that they fucked with marijuana and cocaine before their really experimental phase musically, but I was under the impression it was about the time Sgt. Pepper's was happening that fucking George Harrison was getting all into like Hinduism and gurus Hinduism gurus and shit, and that's where he and John Lennon and I think Paul McCartney did LSD. I could be wrong. I'm
not aware of George doing any drugs. What I do know is that Paul McCartney and John Lennon both experienced LSD via, I think, John Lennon's dentist, who ended up being like on the payroll of MI6, who was charged with a specific
that's the
task.
Fucking song off of Revolver, isn't it?
How do you know that?
It's well researched at this point. You can watch
that Dr. Robert off of Revolver. I believe there was a
Revolver
song.
Is it's the last song on Revolver. Turn off your mind, relax, and flow downstream.
That song fucking kills.
It's a great track.
Love that song.
So that was the only time that John Lennon and Paul McCartney, while they were in the Beatles, did acid. Everybody thinks that they were a bunch of druggies and they did acid all the time, but there's no evidence to suggest it, and there's never been any proof. And by the way, Paul McCartney did die.
Oh God, you're a subscriber to that.
They killed him, bro.
The Paul is dead.
Paul McCartney was a big fan of Stockhausen, and he provided.
Stop really quick so that we can bring Casey up to date on this. Okay, so there's a
theory he's dead.
It wasn't just a theory. There was a whole movement back in the day of people theorizing that Paul McCartney was dead. Someone was playing.
So there's like you're saying there's.
I Am the Walrus, when you play it backwards, the theory is that says actually Paul is dead. Paul is dead. Paul is dead.
And then if you play back Strawberry Fields at a certain speed, it says it's John's voice going, "I buried Paul."
Yep.
But okay, the idea
according is to Wikipedia, he is not dead.
Yeah.
Good source.
Oh, wait, so who's the guy that's walking around that says he's John, whose wife thinks who is this guy?
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney of the Beatles was the more innovative of the four Beatles. He was the one that had, I think, the most to prove, and also the strongest vocabulary of kind of the modern music of the time. And by the time that Rubber Soul came out, the British government became increasingly concerned that they were going to have a more outsized influence on television programs like Shindig and other things that were running in the UK at that time that were music shows.
But the Beatles were going to have an influence.
Yeah, in a big way. And so instead of that happening, the United States invites him over to do the Ed Sullivan Show. So the Beatles were being tracked by MI6 and the CIA from the very beginning because of their huge popular fan base in Hamburg, which they took a bunch of amphetamines and did, I think, 2 shows a night for like 2 years straight.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you get famous, right? Is by doing that. Because that's how you do music, is by relentlessly performing and honing yourself every day.
How do you know that's true?
Hold on, to give you some quick context, the Beatles did lean into this whole Paul is dead thing with their branding on their album.
And it works
what do you
great.
mean dead? Like he actually
died.
They planted articles in the stories, in the magazines.
It was in their
him.
It was on their fucking. It was in their fucking album artwork on the vinyls. Like there's like a picture of all of them in white tuxedos, and all of them have red roses except for Paul has a black rose.
Paul is facing the opposite direction on the other album, on the street.
Oh, no, about Abbey Road.
Abbey Road. Yeah.
That, and also he has bare feet because he's getting buried.
Yep.
And the other members in the Beatles were claiming that he had died.
No, they were claiming he didn't die.
No, yeah, they didn't say anything about it.
They didn't have anything.
They played into it.
Yep.
Okay.
See, and this is
money.
The kind of. This is like a precursor to the way that Andy Warhol saw art and how you kind of establish yourself as a character within the society. It's a precursor to all that. And so what it leads to is the realization that popular music promoted by the governments and the militaries of the world at the time were already at that point in time becoming too powerful and too out of control, and they had to dial it back. And so there was a massive cultural undertaking by these agencies who now comprise the Five Eyes to use music as a way to kind of put a pacifier on further human intellectual development. And it's working.
Are there released documents from these alphabet agencies that talk about this?
The MK Ultra program is the best example. It yielded actually some of our best thinkers. And it was all in an effort to figure out how to combat this cultural development. Ted Kaczynski came out of that.
They specifically were using music to control and target culture.
And LSD.
Oh, yeah.
Charles Manson was part of this.
Yes, he fucking was.
Yep.
And like that's
they're all
still
smart guys.
That's still like in the like regular whatever media contested. That's bullshit. That guy that released the book, I forget who it was.
Yeah, he was on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Very good book. Very good book.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't finished it because I keep falling asleep because I'm putting it on at night when I go to bed. But it's really fucking interesting.
I edited the audiobook of it.
Oh no shit, that's badass.
I used to work at Audible.
That's what I'm listening to. Fuck yeah.
There you go. Wow. So, yeah, that was a pretty big important moment for me when I heard that book.
What's the premise of
go on the Charles Manson thing?
Charles Manson was a very peculiar fellow who actually had a lot of really profound, interesting things to say.
And his tie to music was he was friends with one of the dudes from the Beach Boys. I forget which.
It was the main guy,
and he was like obsessed with trying to get a close relationship with the Beatles.
Yes.
Brian Wilson?
What's his name? Brian Wilson.
Yes,
that's it.
Yes, that is it.
What? And Charles Manson's put out some sick fucking music, guys. Listen to Charles Manson's music if you haven't heard it yet.
I tried listening to some on Spotify and I wasn't impressed, but I'm probably not getting the good stuff.
It's lo-fi, and so like you have to embrace it kind of like Syd Barrett or like the Velvet Underground, that kind of thing. But for the 60s, at the time he was doing that shit, it's pretty interesting music, actually. Most of the time when music is preemanating something that's going to happen far away from the time it's made, it's because the musician or the composer is like really innovative and out of this world. Anthony Braxton conceived of peer-to-peer networking before computers even had a way to do that. He employed a musical environment to make that happen. And in so doing, invented peer-to-peer networking before Napster's founders were even alive.
I don't know who that is.
Anthony Braxton is the world's greatest living composer, and he is a hero and a gentleman. I would strongly encourage, if you want to hear the most fucked up shit you'll ever hear in your life, listen to Anthony Braxton, but then fucking bop your head to it because it's funky. But it's also extremely challenging.
What would you recommend? First thing.
Composition number 40B.
Let's see. Spotify.
That's a pretty good way to get into it. It's on Spotify. Yeah.
Really?
Anthony Braxton is a good example of actually something that was brought up earlier that I think will be very valuable to understand about why I hate the music industry.
Composition number, sorry, 40B?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a record he released in the 80s.
How do I find this? Sorry, what year?
I don't remember the exact year. Just look up
Braxton.
Yes, that's it. Anthony Braxton has like 400 compositions, and their titles are graphical. They don't have names. They're pictures, they're images, they're paintings sometimes. And he only ever started to number them after he had a very successful record deal on Arista Records. That's the Clive Davis. Yeah. So Clive Davis gives the most avant-garde jazz artist ever to live a record deal. And he sold a lot of records. And all of the titles of his music were pictures. And because of this, BMI did not register one single radio play of any of his records, which he sold hundreds of thousands of copies of for 10 years and gave him no legal recourse to make any of his money on all of the cultural impacts that man made over the years. And why did he have this trouble? Because he wanted to be creative, because he didn't want to do what other people did in music. He wanted to change things for a change. And what did that lead to? It led to his impoverishment.
4B or 40B?
40B.
40.
Or 40N. The thing that
there you go.
I have found to be a
Anthony Braxton Quartet, number 40B.
That'll do it.
All right, cool. That was very difficult to find.
See, Spotify does not want you to discover stuff.
No, once I typed in 40B, this popped up. Yeah.
No, but so my point is that this man has put out more records than almost anybody. He's put out hundreds of records, hundreds over his lifetime, because his view of recorded music is that it's a way to document a trajectory that a single composer can be on for his entire life. It's a way to have a snapshot of what was happening in his musical career at that moment.
Not being even remotely discriminatory when it comes to what you put out in a way. Like if I put out every unfinished, it
doesn't have to be unfinished. You just have to decide it's finished earlier.
But even in that case, just every single thing that I composed, I would just put it out.
If it's in a place where he believes it should be, because he believes it's in a place where the record needs to hold, that.
Yeah, you could think about that in some healthy form of social media too.
Yeah.
I kind of consider my YouTube channel and some other people's YouTube channels similarly to that.
It's a running dialogue, right?
Yeah. It's a running dialogue.
An oral history.
It's both a show and a form of entertainment, but it also kind of acts like a journal in its own way.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassing. It absolutely is. It's very, very humbling seeing wow, that was me. Jesus, I'm fucking cringy. I fuck out 10 years from now, I'll think the same thing about me right now. But it's just, this.
You recorded with that guy, Andrew. What was wrong with you? No, but see, that's the thing, right? The progression of time.
Listening to too much free jazz.
The progression of time is what gives you that feeling. And it's the fear that we have of regretting our past that speaks to why music does not develop innovatively anymore. Because the fear now.
That's a damn interesting observation.
Yeah.
You don't want to have the guilt of being insufficient.
Yeah. And so thank God the music industry coalesced this feeling by not even bothering to try and do anything good, right? The entire point of music is to get away with not making their money by making music. It's by doing everything to avoid focusing on the music. That's how you make money in music today. So you have to do everything you can possibly to step away from your instrument, step away from your training, step away even from your desire to not work with horrible software written by gay nerds. This is the thing, right? Very infrequently when you encounter somebody who has been exposed to the way these people think and also hates it. Most of the time, you don't get to work at Amazon, Audible, and all that, all these media companies, by explicitly saying that everyone you work with is really bad, right?
Yeah.
But I got exposure to the way that modern technology technocracy actually is a better phrase, has been applied to music in an effort to kill it. And technocracy will really benefit.
I don't think it's in an effort to kill it. I think that's a byproduct.
It will be a hard benefit to every technocracy and every technology company when music is behind us. They know it, and they're doing everything they can to kill it.
Oh, they say that until they realize music is necessary for the human function.
Did you guys end up ever seeing any of those live streamed, remotely networked concerts that they did during COVID? Or did you ever see a live streamed concert during COVID, during the lockdowns?
I just didn't, because it's
why?
Devin Townsend did one actually, but that was just, I don't know.
But why didn't that interest you guys?
I got other shit to do.
I don't know. To be fair, I don't know. I'm just not the type to sit and watch a show on my computer.
Right.
Though weirdly enough, I would watch like a mixed and finished presentation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't watch a live stream of a show. I don't know why.
Why is that? Think about it. It's a thing that if you don't internalize the question and ask yourself, why do I hate that so much? You'll never see my point. But if you ask yourself,
it's not that I hate it.
What do you mean?
It's more like if I want the quote unquote best representation, I would go to the recorded piece. But I'm essentially getting a less gooder recorded piece. If I want a less gooder version, I want to see the actual like shit happening in front of me.
That's correct.
You know
because you don't want garbage time. You want real time. Right. And this is an insight that Nick Land gives us.
I guess that even goes further to the point. How do you have any fucking clue that live thing is even fucking live?
That's correct. You should be suspicious because lots of things are deep fakes these days, but that's beside the point. The point I'm trying to make here is that we all internalize our hatred for this stuff. And you don't even realize it. Again, because we're like fish in water here. Time is inevitable, so is sound. Every single human being is born only knowing how to do one thing: scream. It's what every human does. No other mammal is born screaming. Only humans are. And when you research this,
born to walk.
Horses
we're born screaming.
Horses are born to walk the same distance as their own mother within 2 weeks. A chicken has to forage for its own water in 2 days or it will die. If a human being gets born and it's not screaming and crying, it will
definitely fucking die. Absolutely.
Because what we're born being able to do from the very start is the same thing that enables our survival. So humans speak and hear. It's the thing that connects us all. And so that's why music matters so much, because it's the only universal language. It's not money. It's not power. It's music. Because
even
it's
if
a
you
thing.
Take the lyrics away from it, Casey.
Lyrics,
still music,
lyrics are a very bad problem in music, actually, because
I agree.
Songs are just one compositional form. Most music composition forms don't have lyrics because music is actually meant to be music.
Semantically ambiguous.
Semantics are a very interesting thing to play with musically, right? Like,
for sure.
Stockhausen actually is a good example of this. But the thing is, you have to do it musically. And that's really hard to do.
Rammstein actually did a pretty fucking good job.
That's actually a really good example of pop music that's succeeded at doing that.
Yeah, totally.
Like uncommon as hell.
I would consider them pop.
Doing what?
At using
playing
vocalizations in a very musical way, in like a semantic and lexical kind of fashion,
and also playing with those semantics.
Yeah,
like the du hast mich, that whole thing. It's a dual meaning because by the end of the sentence you don't know whether he's saying you have or you hate because it's contextual.
Yeah.
So that's actually part of what's cool about it if you know German.
Yeah.
Why were so many of the music masters during the Romantic era German?
Nazi. No.
It's because of their language.
You think so?
Absolutely. Because
I can't fucking okay, all I wanted to do was practice mixing.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
All I wanted to do was practice mixing. And I got inspired to do this fucking Rammstein song because I'm like, okay, this is something I can do relatively quickly and it'll sound great. And I had to learn German. I was so pissed. This is such a hard thing. Thank God I have fans and fellow friends who are German to help me through learning this in a quick fashion, it was still a pain in the dick.
That is helpful though, because Germans are overwhelmingly talented in music.
Yeah, they are very much so.
Like extremely so. I mean, if you take the average German out, they can school you on any instrument. Like it's just because of the cultural tradition. They've maintained a very strong connection to their composers because they played with the kind of vocal dynamism that only their language really offers the Western European world.
I've never liked classical German pieces. I can't with the language.
You ever heard?
You know,
my favorite is actually Finnish.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay.
Well, but is there a good example of anyone Finnish composers who use Finnish lyrics in their music?
I mean, do metal bands count?
Well, no, of course they do.
But talking about classic. Yeah. Talking about classical.
I don't know any Finnish classical.
There's
music.
Is Sibelius Finnish?
That's fucking Yuka's. That's like Yuka's family.
Sibelius is
Yuka
dope obviously. As fuck.
That's like Yuka's family.
Yeah, Sibelius destroys.
Awesome. Yeah,
I didn't know he was Finnish.
Yuka. Like, I think Yuka. I think Sibelius is like where Yuka went in Finland, and like his dad wrote the book on African American music. For four.
Now we're talking about the composer,
Sibelius.
Oh yeah, okay. I meant the institute in Finland,
named after the composer.
I guess.
I think Sibelius.
I don't even know if that's what it's called. Honestly.
I think he was, but there's a couple of really good Finnish composers.
Okay, I'm looking this up now.
But it's probably a similar thing. Jamie. So like Iceland has this too, where they have a lot of Estonia, right?
He was Finnish.
Arvo Pärt.
Jean Sibelius is Finnish.
Yep.
Had no fucking idea. That's awesome.
So like these are all examples of countries that have very dynamic language systems, and they have a lot of multilingual people. And so the way that they apply that to their music, again, because of Harry Partch and what he said, that all music descends from vocal stuff, right? The influences that German people, that Finnish people, that Icelandic people have in their music is in the exotic variety of ways that they know how to communicate with their voice.
Huh.
It's also why Berlin had a big techno phase. It's why lots of Eastern European countries really embrace free jazz, because they have a unique cultural association with that kind of dynamism. Han Benink, the jazz drummer from the Netherlands, is a great example of this. He can fucking out drum almost anybody on a single like triangle. He can out drum anybody with like a double kick drum. He can just.
I wonder if Yuka knows all about these the Germans and obviously the Finnish and the Nordics.
So like,
he's not here.
This is the thing though, right? Back to computers and why I'm here in the first place. What do I offer the world looking at music like this, right? Why are we talking about this?
That's
it's because
good question.
Here's the answer. I'm going to tell you guys, because you should never fear failure, because what we do in music, what we're all trying to do is a propulsion that we cannot ignore. None of us can help it. We have to make music. I'm sure you two agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only reason I did the fucking Rammstein thing. That I have to make fucking music. It's not because I was like, this is my key to money.
Right.
This is not my key to money.
Music is a key to fulfillment.
Yes.
And to intelligence.
Meaning helps you touch it.
Intelligence.
It's intelligence, especially. Because what it gives you the ability to do is get tolerant to a lot of perspectives. Because again, what's music do when it's done well? It exposes you to new things. Because a person that enjoys listening to music,
you would hate my live stream,
exploring music.
I bitch so much about shit on my live stream.
No, but that's my point. You have a direct connection, and it allows you to continue to practice your instrument, to be technically proficient, and that allows you to have achievement.
For that matter, too, even though I'm bitching about it the whole time, I've been exposed to it.
Yeah, which
is important. You know.
You have to live the challenge that you're facing. You have to get someone else to agree that this is something that I deal with too. And how do you do that? You do it by getting people together and playing music. Musicians, when they made money at it, used to be seen as like disreputable. Like it used to be like well, a musician was typically like a bard, someone like in like a bar, getting free drinks
in the
night.
In the court, they were like the lowest of the low.
That's right.
I think they were lower than the jester, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it was shameful to do something so human, so intrinsic to everyone's experience and make money on it. That's like what the Jews used to do with banking.
For anyone wondering, Andrew is Jewish.
And the bad kind of Jew, like the New York Jews that are atheists. So, sorry. No, but so like look
You're
at
a fucking madman. I love it.
no, but listen, man, this is a good experience that everyone will have. Look at Hebrew, all right? Look at the language. It's a beautiful language, extremely musical. Judaism has the concept of a cantor. It's a person whose only job is to be fat and to sing, okay? And why is that? Because without the cantor, Hebrew would have never made it. The only Jewish language that made it into modernity was Yiddish, which is German and oriented, and it sounds hideous. It's a very ugly language.
I don't know,
no music is sung
It's kind
in
of
Yiddish.
hilarious. I find it endearing. Yes, yeah, no music sung in Yiddish, thank God.
It's true, right? No, even so there's a Jewish form of music called klezmer.
Yeah.
And even they shy away from using their native tongue because, again, they're German Jews, right? And so Hebrew as a spoken language only survived because it was the only way to sing pretty things that were Jewish.
Huh.
You couldn't sing Yiddish. No one wanted to listen to that. Why would you? There's Mozart. He sings in German and it's way better. There's the magic flute, and all that. Madame Butterfly, all that. So like the motivation to keep Hebrew around, it wasn't until Israel came about.
Hebrew sung is really gorgeous.
It's incredibly beautiful, which is why it's so old and successful, because they were some of the first to nail this. Have you guys ever heard an Islamist singing at the top of one of those towers in like Turkey? Same
shit
thing.
is fire.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You're
guys.
good. I don't give a shit. It's whatever.
Edit that out. So you see my point, right? Like the way that these cultures survive through any odds is through their music. And so you do it by embracing the hardships of that culture and you enhance it. That's how Hebrew music succeeded. That's how klezmer succeeded. Because what was the one thing that every German Jew did not do during World War II? They didn't dance. And that's what klezmer is, guys. It's dance music for Jews in Germany. And so like when you look at, if you have a solid understanding of the history and of the musicology, there's never a blank indication. There's always evidence to back up why the music of that time was like that. And so it speaks to why we have to all value what we're doing in music a lot more than how much money we're making or how much power or success we're yielding. Because that's the thing I want to be able to say here at this interview, right? If it's one thing I want people who listen to this to know, it's that you're an incredible person for caring about music. And the only thing that you can do to fail at it is to stop, because we need to do it. And if we don't do it, we all die.
I think that's the perfect way of summing it up. That's the perfect
so please
way. We all die.
Don't stop. And also remember that you are the music maker, not Steinberg, not Avid, not Ableton Live. It's never your interface or your product. It's always you. So,
bam.
Penis.